The fluorescent lights inside the Riverbend diner flickered with the same exhausted rhythm that seemed to drain every last bit of strength from my body. I wiped down the counter for what must have been the 100th time that night, the sharp tang of industrial cleaner mingling with the scent of coffee and cold French fries until my stomach tightened even though hunger had long faded. My back throbbed with that familiar dull ache that comes after 8 straight hours on my feet, made worse by the tension I carried home every night like a debt I could never pay. Elena, table 6 needs more coffee. Charlie's voice drifted from the pass through window of the kitchen. I nodded, reaching for the pot with hands that had grown more calloused than I ever imagined at 27. The diner's red leather booths and shiny metal trim looked worn and tired under the harsh lights, stripped of the cheerful nostalgia the owner liked to brag about during the daytime. It was nearing midnight on a Tuesday, the slowest shift of the week, with only a few regulars scattered across the room, quiet enough that the ticking wall clock seemed loud. Old Mr. Vernon was still nursing his decaf at table 3, 2 college students hunched over books in the far corner, and the man at table 7, who had been sitting there for more than an hour with a cup of black coffee that hadn't gone down by even an inch. I had noticed him the moment he walked in. It was impossible not to. He didn't fit here. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a thick black jacket scuffed with road dust yet somehow still impossibly neat. His dark hair cropped short. Cheekbones sharp, eyes focused as if he could see through the table without blinking. He sat straight, silent, with no phone, no book, no laptop, just a cup of black coffee and a gaze that slid across the room every so often, like he was waiting for something, or someone. He didn't feel like a customer. He felt like a sign, a warning. Every time I walked past him, even though he said nothing, attention radiated from him tight and coiled, like a violin string pulled so taut that one wrong touch could snap it. I had seen eyes like his before in veterans, in people who had lost everything and feared nothing. But with him, there was something else. A cold, disciplined restraint, as if the storm inside him had been caged for a very long time. When I refilled Mr. Vernon's cup, the man at table 7 let his eyes drift over me. Not threatening, not curious, assessing. And what chilled me was that I didn't know what grade I had just been given. If you're listening to this and something in the story stirs a feeling inside you, take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like and share this video so we can keep bringing you heartfelt stories every day. And if you don't mind, tell me, where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and let us know which corner of the world this story has found its way to. We always treasure your words. I returned to the counter, trying not to glance toward table 7, but even without looking, I felt that gaze like a streak of cold tracing my spine. The pot was nearly empty, so I set it on the burner to warm and stood still for a few seconds, realizing my heart was beating faster than it should. Not from exhaustion, from fear. That feeling, that sense that something was about to happen, as if my body knew before my mind could catch up, rose through me. I was about to ask Charlie if any orders were still pending when my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I pulled it out, the screen lighting up with the only name I would answer no matter what I was doing. Mia. I slipped to the back corner, away from customers and coworkers, and pressed the phone to my ear. Her voice was a whisper. Mom, I can't sleep. A blaring TV in the background, the crash of a glass shattering, then a roar. I held my breath. Travis is home? I asked, keeping my voice steady while my throat felt scraped raw. Mm-hmm. He's mad. There's no beer in the fridge. I'm hiding in the closet. I heard her hold her breath after saying it. Even in a whisper, her voice trembled. I closed my eyes, pressing my free hand to my chest as if I could hold my heart in place. Okay, listen to me, I said softly. I'm going to tell Charlie to watch the diner for 10 minutes, and I'll come home right away. No, don't, she whispered back quickly. I'm okay. He'll go to sleep soon like last time. I just wanted to hear your voice. I turned toward the wall, biting down on my lip until I tasted blood to stop myself from breaking. She was only 7, yet she had already learned how to soothe me, how to endure without causing trouble. Travis didn't hit her. He never had. But the way he threw things, shouted, slammed doors, created a world where she lived curled up in fear, waiting for the next burst of rage like prey, waiting for a predator. And me, powerless, working night shifts to pay rent and praying he would pass out early. On the other end of the line, Mia inhaled softly. Mom? Yeah, sweetheart. He flipped the couch again, but I brought my dinosaur. I'm holding him really tight. I nodded as if she could see me. Good girl. Try to sleep, okay? I love you. I love you too. The call ended, but the pounding in my chest echoed like a ticking clock. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at a patch of peeling paint on the wall, then returned to the counter like a wind-up toy. Gabriel Holt was still at table 7, his cup still untouched. His eyes weren't on me, but something in the way his body leaned forward slightly, his shoulders loosened, his hand resting on the table with intention, made me feel he had heard something, or sensed it. I looked away quickly, refilling the pot, pretending to focus on order slips, though my hands shook visibly. Charlie eyed me from the kitchen pass-through. Everything okay, Lena? I nodded, forcing a crooked smile. Fine. Just tired. I glanced at the clock. 11:18. 2 more hours until the end of my shift. An entire lifetime. I wished I could run out right then, rush home to hold my daughter, pack our things, disappear somewhere far away. But life wasn't that simple. I didn't have the money. I didn't have a place to go. And Travis always found me. I didn't need pity, but I longed for something steady, something strong enough to keep me from collapsing. I took a breath, lifted my head, and for the first time met Gabriel's eyes. He was looking straight at me, quietly, not probing, not pitying, as if he already knew exactly what I was trying to hide, and in that gaze, for the first time, I didn't feel alone. The small bell above the diner door chimed softly, that familiar sound signaling someone entering in the quiet stretch of the late night. I was still holding the coffee pot, my eyes not yet pulled away from Gabriel, when Charlie suddenly called out from the kitchen, his low voice oddly tense. Lena, there's a child at the door. I frowned, set the pot down, and hurried toward the front. The streetlight outside cast a pale glow through the fogged glass, and my heart dropped a beat when I recognized the tiny pink sandals, the faded blue hoodie, and the tangle of brown hair I had smoothed down every night. Mia. I rushed from behind the counter on instinct, pushing the door open so fast the November wind slapped my face with a stinging cold. She stood there clutching her worn-out stuffed green dinosaur, her eyes wide in the harsh streetlight, round and trembling. She wasn't crying. She just stood still, as if afraid to believe she had reached a safe place. Mia, sweetheart, I'm here. Why are you here? How did you get here? My voice broke as I wrapped her in my arms, her small body icy cold, her lips tinged purple. She whispered against my ear. I walked. Travis was breaking things. I got scared. You said your diner had lights on all night, so I came to find you. You said if I met a good person, I'd be safe. I pulled her even closer, tears spilling before I could stop them. How many blocks, baby? How many blocks did you walk? 6. I counted by the lampposts. My breath hitched, and I held Mia as if loosening my grip even slightly might cause her to disappear. Charlie had stepped out from the kitchen, his face pale. I heard the diner door close behind us, followed by slow, steady footsteps. Gabriel. He didn't say a word, just looked at the two of us, his eyes sharpening, deepening. That was when I noticed Mia was holding something in her hand. A small pale pink plastic tube filled with coins and a few crumpled bills. She held it out toward Gabriel. "Mister, you're the scary man, right? I need a scary man." Gabriel's brows pulled together, not quite understanding. Mia continued. "I have $3.17. You can have it if you'll be my monster for one night. You just need to go to my house and scare the real monster away. Can you do that?" I froze, wanting to hush her, but my throat locked tight. Gabriel crouched down slowly, knees touching the floor, his eyes never leaving her face. He didn't smile, didn't pity her. He reached out, took the tube of money, then gently placed it back into her hands. "Keep it, kid." Then he asked, "What's your address?" She recited it clearly, hitting every number without hesitation. Gabriel stood, turned to me, and spoke in that steady voice of his. "When your shift ends, I'm coming with you. We're taking her home." I opened my mouth to protest, but no words came. Something in the way he spoke made refusal impossible. Not because he intimidated me, but because his certainty made it sound like the decision had already been made. Mia looked up at me, fear still flickering in her eyes but softening. "I trust him. He's not like monsters. Not at all." I looked at Gabriel, and for the first time, I believed what my daughter just said. Not because I knew who he was, but because he was the first person who didn't ask whether I needed help. He simply said he would. And in that moment, I let that fragile sliver of trust hold me up, even if only for one night. Charlie brought Mia a warm cup of milk in a chipped winter deer mug. She curled up on the seat by the wall, her stuffed dinosaur on her lap, her small hands wrapped around the cup as if holding the whole world. I draped my coat around her, reminding myself that for now, at least, she was safe, in a brightly lit diner, not hiding in a closet. But that safety felt thin as frost on a window, ready to shatter with one harsh breath. I stood there, my hands still trembling from everything that had happened, when Gabriel walked toward me, each step measured and quiet, stopping half a pace away. He didn't speak immediately. He watched Mia for a long moment, then turned to me, his voice low and dry like sand under a boot. "You can't take her home alone tonight." I clenched the strap of my apron, defensiveness rising by instinct. "I don't need an escort. I've been doing this for years. I'm not afraid." His gaze didn't soften, didn't harden. "It's not about fear. Travis will be there waiting. And tonight, he lost control." His words, though spoken plainly, crushed the air in my chest. How did he know his name? How did he know he'd be waiting? Gabriel didn't answer the questions I hadn't dared to speak. He simply exhaled, a faint breath like cold fog. "I'll wait until your shift ends. Then I'm taking you both home. Not walking with you. Taking you." That final emphasis made me meet his eyes. There was something unfamiliar in the way he spoke about responsibility. Not a suggestion, not an offer, but a declaration of a task already accepted. A certainty that left no room for refusal, yet carried no force of coercion. And for some reason, I wasn't afraid. I don't know whether I nodded or simply stood silent long enough for it to count as agreement, but I returned to the counter to finish closing as usual, my mind blank except for the image of Mia curled on the seat and Gabriel standing like a statue beside table 7, unmoving yet ready to act at any moment. My shift ended at 1:15 in the morning. Charlie looked at me, opened his mouth as if to say something, then just patted my shoulder, a quiet understanding. I wrapped Mia in her scarf, lifted her into my arms. She had fallen asleep at some point. still clutching her dinosaur. Gabriel opened the door, holding it with one hand, using the other to open his long coat to shield us from the wind. No one spoke. There was no need. Outside, the cold was sharp enough to cut skin, the wind threading through the empty streets, whistling through the gaps between old buildings. Gabriel hadn't brought a car. He walked. I was startled, worried but didn't dare ask, because his stride was unwavering, purposeful, as if he had already mapped out every step. When I did ask softly, he answered simply, "I don't want Travis seeing a strange car outside your place. It'll make him cautious. I want him off guard." His reasoning sent a chill down my spine, not out of fear, but from the realization that he had thought through dangers I had never even allowed myself to imagine. 6 blocks on foot in the night, Mia in my arms, and Gabriel walking beside us, his eyes sweeping each side of the street, never drifting even for a second. There was something in his presence that felt unfamiliar, not like an ordinary man. No fidgeting, no sighing, no empty reassurances. Just a quiet, steel-like steadiness. When we reached the old apartment building I rented, Gabriel turned to me once more. "You don't need to say anything. You don't owe me thanks. I'm doing this because men like Travis shouldn't be allowed to last too long." As he finished, the dim yellow light from the hallway behind me cast a glow across half of his face. And in that half-lit expression, I saw something difficult to name. Not anger, not pity, but the silence of someone who had seen too much darkness and still chose to stand between it and anyone too small to fight it. At the time, I knew almost nothing about Gabriel Holt, but I knew enough to walk through the doorway that night beside him without looking back. I walked along the inside edge of the sidewalk, keeping close to the building, my arms wrapped tightly around Mia as she slept against my chest. The wind swept between rows of old brick buildings, carrying the damp, dusty scent that clung to this neighborhood. A few scattered windows glowed faintly like the lazy, half-open eyes of a city drifting toward sleep, leaving only the echo of a late-night bus and the clatter of bottles rolling somewhere in an alley. Gabriel walked beside me, not too close, not too far, but always keeping himself between me and the street. He said nothing, and the silence pressed in around us as heavily as the darkness itself. But strangely, I didn't fear it. It was simply taut, like a wire stretched to its limit, waiting for the slightest disturbance to snap. I glanced toward him, and in the dull yellow glow of the street lamps, I saw his hand relaxed at his side, yet the muscles beneath his coat held tension, veins standing out along his wrist, each step even and controlled, as though he was prepared to stop at the slightest threat. I didn't have to ask to know he was in a state of readiness, moving like a wolf pacing beside its pack. When Mia shifted in her sleep and her dinosaur slipped from her fingers, I bent down to pick it up. And it was Gabriel who handed it back to me, his hand brushing mine for the briefest second, steady, cool, but not cold. Outside an old laundromat, a man smoked under the flickering sign. He looked our way as we passed, his gaze sliding over me before settling on Gabriel. For half a heartbeat, the entire atmosphere shifted. Gabriel stopped, angling his body just enough to shield me. No words were exchanged, only a certain look. And after a long breath, the man crushed out his cigarette and turned inside. We kept walking. I had no idea who Gabriel was in the larger world, but I was beginning to understand that he did not belong to safe places. And perhaps because of that, he knew how to create safety for others. As we neared the apartment building, I paused. The light on the third floor was on, the curtain pulled aside slightly, as though someone had been standing at the window not long before. Instinct tightened my hold on Mia, sending my heart racing. Gabriel followed my gaze, then stepped fully in front of me, blocking my view as he said quietly, almost as an order, "Walk straight inside. Don't stop." The front door opened easily, and I set my hand on the handle without looking back. He was behind me. We climbed the worn wooden stairs, each creak of the steps echoing through the empty hallway. I felt like a character in a film where every scene was too quiet to trust. Gabriel let me unlock the door first. I slid the key in carefully, afraid to wake Mia, but also afraid Travis might still be inside. The door swung open. A dark room greeted us, heavy with the stale smell of cigarettes. Relief escaped me in a breath, but Gabriel didn't step in right away. He stood still, eyes sweeping across the living room from the overturned couch to the empty beer cans rolling on the floor. After a few seconds of tense silence, he nodded once. "No one here." I walked inside, setting Mia on the old armchair near the window and tucking a blanket around her. She stayed asleep, tiny fingers still clenched around her dinosaur as though afraid it might vanish. When I turned back, Gabriel was standing in the small kitchen, the cabinet doors flung open, dishes scattered, clear signs that Travis had been in a rage before storming out. Gabriel ran a hand over a crack along the counter's edge and then looked at me. "You can't stay here alone any longer." It wasn't a suggestion. He spoke it like a sentence passed on the entire apartment. I didn't answer not because I disagreed, but because for the first time in months, someone else was considering the safety of Mia and me as if it mattered to them as much as their own. Not out of obligation, not out of affection, but simply because it was right. Gabriel studied me for a long moment, as though weighing something, then stepped closer, his voice dropping lower, rougher. "I'll come back tomorrow night. If he shows up before I do, call me. Don't open the door." Under the dim kitchen light, his seriousness filled every word, and even though nothing about tomorrow was certain, I believed one thing completely. If he said he would return, he would. I barely slept the entire next day. Every small sound in the hallway jolted me upright. The bedroom window was open a crack for fresh air, but it also meant the noises from the street drifted in like unexpected knocks. Mia slept deeply after I carried her to bed, faint shadows still beneath her eyes, marks from too many nights spent afraid with no one to protect her. I sat by the window, knees pulled to my chest, palms cold. Morning light filtering weakly through the thin curtains and laying pale yellow streaks on the floor like faded memories. Since Gabriel left, I hadn't truly taken a full breath. I didn't know why I trusted him. I didn't know who he was, where he came from, or what he did. All I knew was that he had been there when I needed someone, and he said he would come back. Men had said many things to me before. Very few had ever meant their words. I told myself that if Travis returned, I would lock the door, refuse to let him in, do everything Gabriel instructed. But I knew myself too well. I knew I would tremble when I heard Travis's voice. I knew panic would rise the moment his eyes fixed on me as though I owed him my entire life. Evening fell faster than I expected. The sky turned ash gray, clouds hanging heavy as though on the edge of rain. I made a simple dinner, some slices of bread and canned soup, while Mia colored quietly at the kitchen table. I kept my phone close, Gabriel's number saved under speed dial. Every time footsteps echoed in the hall or someone knocked on a neighbor's door, I held my breath. And then, around 7 in the evening, the knock came. Not a knock, a pounding. 3 heavy blows that struck my chest like a hammer. Mia jerked, her crayon skidding across the page, then looked at me, frightened. I stood, legs nearly giving out. I didn't need the peephole to know who stood outside. Travis. His voice seeped through the wood, rough, soaked in alcohol and rage. "Elena, open the door. You think you can hide forever? Where'd you take my kid? Who are you talking to?" I didn't respond. The phone was in my hand, my thumb hovering over the speed dial button, but I didn't press it. I remembered Gabriel's words. Don't open. Don't answer. Only call if it's truly dangerous. But Travis knew I was inside. He could sense it. And my silence enraged him. The pounding turned into kicks. He was trying to break the lock. Mia cried, clinging to my leg, squeezing her dinosaur. I couldn't let her see this. I crouched down and whispered, "Run to the bedroom, lock the door, don't come out until I call you." She hesitated for only a second before running off. I stood in the middle of the living room, phone still clenched in my hand, heart pounding painfully. The lock rattled under another blow. One more hit, and it nearly gave way. Then the door burst open. Travis stood there, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot, the stench of alcohol hitting me like a slap. He walked in as if he still owned the place. I stepped back. He jabbed a finger toward me. "Who were you talking to last night? There was a man here, wasn't there? Who is he?" I didn't answer. He moved closer, only inches away now. I could smell the cigarettes, the sweat, that familiar sourness that had haunted me for years. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, another voice broke through the room, low, cold as stone. "Take your hand down." Travis spun around. Gabriel stood in the doorway. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. But the way he stood, broad shoulders filling the frame, eyes fixed on Travis like a verdict, froze the entire room. "Who the hell are you?" Travis spat. "What gives you the right to walk in here?" "I'm the person she calls if you come back." And she called. Gabriel stepped forward once. Just once. But it sent Travis stumbling back as if pushed by something invisible. I had never seen Travis afraid. Not once. But now he looked less like a predator and more like a man unraveling, trembling. Gabriel didn't touch him. He didn't need to. He only looked at him and said one final sentence. "If you take one more step into this home, you'll wish you had never been born." Travis glanced at me one last time, then turned and staggered down the hall, his footsteps fading into the silence. Gabriel closed the door, locking it with a firm, steady hand. He didn't look at me, didn't say another word. He simply sat down, as though he had just shut out a nightmare. I stood there, not knowing whether to cry or to thank him. I only knew that someone had saved me, for the first time, and I had no idea what to do with a feeling like that. Gabriel sat motionless on the old chair by the window, his back straight, his hands interlaced and resting in front of him, as if standing guard over a territory he had just finished defending. I leaned against the wall, my breath still uneven, my whole body unsteady. It took several minutes before I could bring myself to walk toward the bedroom door where Mia was hiding behind the lock. I tapped twice and whispered, "It's me, sweetheart. It's safe now." She opened the door, her eyes streaked with dried tears but no longer crying. She simply threw herself into my arms, burying her face in my neck and clinging tight. I carried her out, and Gabriel rose to his feet, stepping aside without looking at me, placing his hand briefly on Mia's shoulder as if to confirm that she truly was safe. I set her down on the couch, tucked the blanket around her, and then turned to Gabriel. "Can you stay for a little while?" I asked softly, barely breathing the words. He nodded. I went to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water, then returned. He held his glass, but didn't drink. We sat in silence, the only sounds the ticking of the wall clock and the faint whistle of the wind outside the window. Neither of us spoke until my phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. A man's voice came through, cold but not hostile. "This is Officer Webb with the local police. We just received a report from someone named Travis Klein. He came to the station saying he was assaulted by a man at his ex-wife's residence." I said nothing. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. The officer continued. But when patrol arrived, there were no signs of a fight or forced entry. Neighbors confirmed hearing shouting but no violence. Mr. Klein left afterward with no further complaint. Still, we advise you to consider filing for a protective order if this situation continues. Thank you, and have a good night. I hung up and looked at Gabriel. He didn't ask, but I knew he had heard every word. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight inside me lift for the first time that night. He was gone, at least for tonight, and maybe for the nights after this one. I turned to Gabriel, meeting his eyes fully for the first time, no longer looking away. Thank you. It was simple, but sincere. He nodded. I'll go, but I'll be back tomorrow. I nodded. Okay. The next evening, when I finished my shift, Gabriel was already standing outside the diner. He didn't speak. He simply walked beside Mia and me like a steady shadow. In the days that followed, Travis didn't return. No messages, no calls, no pounding at the door in the middle of the night or the flicker of a shadow in the hallway that made me shake with fear. My breathing found its rhythm again. Mia slept better. She laughed more. The drawings she made began filling with yellow and green instead of only black and gray. I called the landlord to replace the locks. Gabriel arranged for a technician to install a small camera at the entrance. Each small task completed felt like a stone lifted off my chest. Slowly, I realized I could exist for more than just survival. One evening, while I was washing dishes, Mia tugged on my shirt and whispered, "Mom, can Gabriel have dinner with us?" I made a picture for him. I dried my hands and bent to kiss her forehead. Ask him, sweetheart. If he says yes, then I say yes. Gabriel was standing at the doorway, a grocery bag in hand. Mia ran to him, holding up a drawing of 3 people standing together under a sky with a big round sun and a dog that looked vaguely like her dinosaur. Can you stay for dinner, please? Gabriel looked at the drawing for a long moment before nodding. He smiled a small, genuine smile. Yes, I'll stay. And I realized then that Travis was no longer the center of the fear inside this home. Something else was beginning to grow slowly, cautiously, but undeniably. A new life, a steadier breath, no shouting, no violence, just measured footsteps and a peace I thought I had lost forever. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, making the apartment seem brighter than usual. Mia sat drawing at the kitchen table, glancing up now and then to ask me questions about colors or strange little animals she imagined. She had finished her breakfast, and I was still getting used to the feeling of not being frantic with fear about what might fall apart next. Something inside me had begun to loosen, to soften, like the hard shell around my chest was starting to crack. I made more coffee, still untouched, when 3 knocks sounded on the door. Firm, even, not too loud. I looked through the peephole. Gabriel. He stood there with a large black canvas bag in his hand, something heavy inside pulling on the straps. I opened the door, and Mia ran out immediately, still holding a colored pencil. You're really here. I made another picture I can show you? Gabriel gave her a small, gentle smile and nodded before turning to me. I brought these. We need to start with the front door. I stepped aside to let him in. Inside the bag were a new lock set, a wireless mini camera system, a small storage device, and a screwdriver kit. He didn't ask for my permission. He didn't wait for my approval. He simply began working, as though he had done this 100 times. I sat beside Mia, watching her color while glancing toward the door as Gabriel knelt, installing the new lock. He worked in silence, precise, without a single wasted movement. When he removed the old lock, he said only, "This one is cheap and easy to break. I'll replace it with a double lock inside and out with an extra deadbolt." When the cameras were in place, one facing the hallway, another tucked into the corner near the window, I walked over with 2 hot coffees. I didn't know what he liked, so I made it black. No sugar. Gabriel took the cup, thanked me, then pointed at the storage device. I set a simple password. Any motion within 3 feet of the door will record a 15-second clip. I'll add the app to your phone. If anything happens, just open it. I nodded and followed his instructions on my phone. These small, practical things, so ordinary, gave me back a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. I looked at Gabriel for a long time, for the first moment that day. He stood in the beam of sunlight from the window, his sleeves rolled up, faint scars along his wrist, every movement steady and deliberate. No hesitation, no questions, as though his protection didn't require justification. Before I could say anything, Mia tugged on his sleeve, holding up her newest drawing. I made the sun bigger than yesterday. Today is prettier, so I think the sun needs to be a little bigger. Gabriel bent down, took the drawing, and nodded with an expression I couldn't quite name. Watching them, something inside me tightened, not with fear, but with something gentler. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. When everything was finally in place, Gabriel checked the door one last time. As he turned back, I stepped forward, still holding my cooling cup of coffee. "Will you come back?" I asked softly, unsure if I even wanted to hear the answer. Gabriel looked at me, his gaze steady, unwavering. "If you want me to." One simple sentence, yet in those words I heard something I hadn't dared to believe for years, that I had a choice. And for the first time after living so long as a guest in my own life, I nodded. "Yes, I want you to." Gabriel continued stopping by the apartment every afternoon after my shift ended. Sometimes he brought a bag of groceries, sometimes a few picture books for Mia, and sometimes things no one asked for, but somehow always proved necessary: replacement light bulbs, a tube of wall adhesive, odds and ends that quietly made life easier. He never stayed long, lingering only long enough to fix something, check the cameras, drink a cup of coffee, and slip away again. Yet his presence, even for those brief minutes each day, made the apartment feel less cramped, less dim, less cold. I didn't ask about his past, partly because I feared that the truth might shatter the fragile peace taking shape around us, partly because I wasn't sure I was ready to know. Still, pieces of his story fell into place quietly over time, enough for me to sense a picture emerging, one unlike anything I had ever imagined. That evening, after Mia had fallen asleep and Gabriel was tightening the last screw on the kitchen cabinet door, I sat across from him with a warm cup of tea between my hands. I asked him, plainly, "What did you do before you came to this town?" Gabriel didn't look up immediately. He turned the screwdriver one final quarter turn before answering. "Do you really want to know who I am?" I nodded. He stayed silent for a few seconds, as if deciding whether to dismantle the invisible wall he had built between himself and the world. Then he spoke, his voice lower than usual. "I used to work for an organization people don't mention at polite dinner tables. Not the government, but not exactly criminals either. The kind of people who make a room go quiet the moment they walk in." I didn't ask the organization's name. I didn't need to. One look in his eyes told me it was a past he would never fully escape. Gabriel watched me, searching for fear. But I wasn't afraid. What I felt was grief for the man he must have been, for the things he must have carried alone. He continued, "I used to be paid to solve problems the police couldn't touch. When you called me scary, you weren't wrong. There was a time I had no boundaries, so long as the mission was completed." "So why did you leave?" I asked, unwilling to soften the question. Gabriel leaned back, his gaze drifting somewhere far beyond the cramped kitchen. "Once, I was assigned to make a witness disappear, a young woman innocent, just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I saw her before I acted, saw the fear in her eyes, and I couldn't do it." He paused. "I quit that night." "Did she live?" He nodded. "I got her out, gave her a new name, sent her to Canada." I still send her money every month. She's safe. I let out a slow breath. You were never a bad man. Gabriel shook his head. No, I was. I was a very bad man. But I was tired of living in the dark. And then, one night, I walked into a diner and saw a woman trembling while she talked on the phone, and I realized I still had a chance to do something right. I set my cup down and looked at him for a long moment. So what are you now? Gabriel lifted one shoulder. I'm someone who can make men like Travis think twice before doing something stupid. And if necessary, I'm the one who stands between them and people like you. I lowered my head, my eyes stinging not because of his past, but because, for the first time, someone chose to stand on my side without me having to beg for it. Gabriel stood and reached for his coat. He didn't say goodbye, same as every night. He simply glanced at me and murmured, I'll be back in the morning. There's an electrician coming to check the wiring. If Mia wakes up, tell her I'll bring more paint colors. And then he left, as if he hadn't revealed anything at all. But I knew that from that moment on, we were no longer strangers. Gabriel was no longer a mystery. He was part of this world, part of my world in a way I hadn't expected, but was quietly grateful for. Life didn't transform dramatically like in the movies. There was no magical moment that overturned everything in a single night. But bit by bit, piece by piece, the cracks in our lives began to close. Gabriel came more often, without needing a reason, sometimes just to drop off a bag of apples he bought from a roadside stand, or to fix the desk lamp that had flickered for months. Mia grew used to having this unfamiliar man around, but what surprised me was how easily she opened her heart to him, something I didn't think she would ever do again. One Sunday morning, while I made coffee and prepared breakfast, Mia ran out of her room wearing mismatched slippers, clutching a picture book. Mom, I want to read this with Gabriel. He understands my dinosaur voice. She said it so confidently, as if it were a given that he was right outside. And he was. Gabriel stood in the hallway with 2 warm waffles still steaming in one hand and coffee in the other, ready to knock. When Mia ran to him and wrapped her arms around his leg, he stiffened for a moment, then set everything down, crouched to her level, and said, You have a dinosaur voice? Then I need to learn dinosaur. They sat right there in the narrow hallway, reading a ridiculous book filled with nonsense words Mia made up herself. I stood in the doorway, coffee pot in hand, my chest tightening with a feeling I hadn't felt in a very long time. Gentleness, steadiness. No more jolting awake at midnight because of footsteps in the hall. No more pretending to sleep deeply so Travis wouldn't explode. My small apartment, once merely a shelter, began to smell like a home. I hung framed pictures again, photos I had taken down before out of fear they might be smashed. I bought a few plants for the windowsill, something I'd never believed I could keep alive. Mia changed even more. She sang more often, sometimes pretending to teach her stuffed animals, imitating my voice or Charlie's from the diner. She slept through the night without screaming or curling into a ball at the sound of distant shouting downstairs. One afternoon, I found her sitting alone in her room, quietly coloring a picture of a house with 3 people and a cat. The house no longer leaned sideways. The sky was no longer gray. Every face had eyes and bright, smiling mouths. I sat beside her and whispered, Who are these people? Without looking up, she said softly, It's our home. You, me, and Gabriel. And the green one is Dino, that's the name of my dinosaur. He likes it here too. I squeezed her shoulder, swallowing the rush of emotion that threatened to spill over. I didn't want to ruin her moment. I hadn't called anyone family since my parents died, and I didn't know what to call Gabriel in this picture of ours. But one thing was certain. He had become a piece of our life we couldn't go without. One evening, as I washed dishes, Mia ran out proudly announcing, Mom, I'm not scared of the monster under the bed anymore. I think Gabriel scared it away. I put Dino under there so if it comes back, Dino will roar and call him. I turned and caught Gabriel watching her from across the room, a faint smile tugging at his lips, a smile I had never seen before. Not a guarded smile, not a smile hiding a shadow, but a smile of someone who no longer needed to defend himself from the world. I didn't know how far Gabriel's past extended, or how much of it still followed him, but the present his present was quietly weaving itself into our days in a way that felt real and warm and required no explanation. And just like that, between slices of toast, dinosaur stories, and the small bursts of laughter filling our mornings, the past began to fade, and the future, though still distant, began taking shape, gaining color, gaining sound. I had never prepared a real dinner for 3 people before. During the years with Travis, meals were nothing more than instant noodles, canned soup, or anything that could quiet hunger before one of his senseless outbursts erupted. After he left, I slowly relearned how to cook not just to survive, but to remember what a peaceful day tasted like. But tonight was different. Tonight, I was cooking not only for myself and Mia, but for Gabriel as well. When he said he would come by later, Mia practically jumped with the joy of someone being told a holiday had arrived early. She chose the blue tablecloth we bought at the weekend fair, arranged 3 place settings, and even put her dinosaur on the 4th chair. "Mom," she said with full seriousness, "if Gabriel guards the door, Dino will guard the table." I laughed as I sliced carrots, listening to her chatter to her stuffed animals, feeling my heart lighter than it had been in years, as if no shadow had ever followed me home. When Gabriel arrived, he wore a simple gray shirt, his hair still damp as if he had just washed it. I didn't know why my heartbeat quickened, but I hurried to invite him in, hiding my fluster by fussing with the stew simmering on the stove. The scent of beef, onions, and herbs drifted warmly through the little kitchen. Gabriel helped me bring bowls to the table, saying little, but every gesture was steady and unhurried, like everything he did. Mia sat in the middle, excited as if this were a celebration. She rambled about art class, a new friend named Casey, and how the monster in her closet had decided to become friends with Dino because it was afraid of Gabriel. He listened, nodding at just the right moments, occasionally asking a question that made her talk even more. And I simply watched, as if looking at a painting I never believed I would one day live inside. When Gabriel served Mia a second helping, I noticed a streak of blue on his sleeve, the color of the markers Mia often used, and I realized she had already begun to leave her small, tender marks on him. Dinner unfolded in the warm yellow glow of the overhead bulb, with the clink of silverware, Mia's giggles, and silences that were no longer uneasy, but gently comforting. After we finished, Gabriel stood to wash the dishes with me. I didn't ask. He simply stepped into the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and asked where I kept the sponge. I handed it to him, my fingertips brushing his wrist, startled by the mix of cool dishwater and the warmth of his skin. He looked at me without a word, but something in that glance made me feel seen in a way no words could have conveyed. When everything was clean, Mia had fallen asleep on the chair, her head nestled against Dino. I carried her to bed, tucked her in, and returned to the living room. Gabriel was still there, not leaving immediately like he always did. He looked around the apartment, which no longer felt like a lonely fortress I had built to survive, but like a place that was learning to hold warmth, voices, and people who stayed. I poured him a cup of tea, and for the first time in weeks, we sat together not out of fear or defense, but simply because we wanted to. I looked at him, my eyes damp with something I couldn't name. He brushed the back of my hand lightly, a touch gentle enough not to startle me, but intentional enough that I couldn't pretend it was accidental. My breath deepened, my chest loosened, and when Gabriel rose to leave, I walked him to the door, not to maintain distance, but to hold on to the sight of him for just a little longer, the way someone watches something important they haven't yet found the courage to name. Later, in the quiet, with only the ceiling fan humming overhead, I understood something clearly. That dinner was not just a meal. It was the beginning of something closer to a family than anything I had ever known. I had begun to believe the past could no longer reach me. Mornings filled with Mia's little songs in the kitchen, evenings when Gabriel stopped by to change a light bulb, check the cameras, or simply sit and listen to Mia talk about her imaginary world. These moments slowly stitched themselves into a routine. The apartment was no longer a hiding place, but a home. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future without Travis in it. But darkness doesn't leave as easily as hope wants it to. It began with a small note tucked under my windshield wiper after work. A square of white paper folded in four, with 4 words scrawled in jagged black ink. I remember standing in the parking lot, the late sun touching the asphalt while my fingers trembled over that paper even though the breeze was barely there. I looked around, saw no one but a dusty old pickup sat at the far end, its engine still warm. I didn't dare approach. I slipped the note into my pocket, hurried to the car, and locked the doors the moment I got inside. I said nothing to Mia on the drive home. I didn't want to frighten her, didn't want to shatter the fragile peace we had gathered piece by fragile piece. But that night, after Mia fell asleep, I sat awake with the note in my hands, reading those words again and again. The handwriting was Travis's. I would know the cut of those letters anywhere they slashed straight into memory. He was watching. He was near. Not breaking down doors, not calling, not pounding at night. Just reminding me, quietly, that he had not disappeared. I didn't call the police. There was no proof, just a piece of paper. And because I knew Travis, he didn't act recklessly. He wanted me afraid, wanted me waiting, wanted my steps to echo with doubt like a shadow trailing my heels. The next morning, Gabriel sensed something wrong the moment he walked in. He didn't ask immediately, he just observed. I was too silent, and Mia sniffled because I refused to let her take Dino to school. When Gabriel walked us to the car, he placed his hand on the door before I could close it. What happened? I hesitated, then pulled the note from my pocket and handed it to him. He read it, his expression darkening not with surprise, but with confirmation. He slid the paper into his own pocket and said quietly, "I'll stay closer now. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't let Mia walk anywhere by herself." I nodded, my stomach tightening not because of his warning, but because of the way he said it, with the steady calm of someone slipping back into a world he knew too well, a world of shadows, danger, and things never spoken aloud. That afternoon, as I prepared dinner, a knock sounded at the door. Not Gabriel, not the firm, familiar rhythm. 2 knocks quick, uncertain. I checked the peephole. No one. But when I opened the door, a small package sat on the floor. No name, no note, just a plain brown box tied with coarse string. My hands shook as I lifted it and brought it inside. Gabriel arrived 5 minutes later. He saw the box sitting on the table and immediately pulled out his phone, bringing up the camera app. He watched the 15-second clip in silence, his jaw tightening. "Smart," he muttered darkly, shoving the phone back into his pocket. Heavy hoodie, kept his head down, stayed right at the edge of the frame, tossed it into the motion sensor zone and ran. Never showed his face. He didn't let me touch the box again. Wearing gloves, he opened it with the careful precision of someone trained to disarm things that can hurt. Inside was an old wooden doll, its head tilted, its hair tangled, with a small cut carved into its forehead as if someone had done it on purpose. Mia walked in just as tears spilled down my face. Not because of the doll, because of the truth it carried. Travis was not gone. He was playing with me, waiting, watching. choosing this moment when I finally felt safe to remind me that safety was a fragile illusion. Gabriel lifted Mia into his arms, holding her close as if by sheer force he could keep fear from seeping into the cracks of the room. He looked at me, and there was no quiet steadiness in his eyes this time, only something deeper, darker. "We're not running, Elena," he said. "I spent my life running. This time I'm staying, and he will regret it." I nodded, though my throat tightened with doubt and dread. I didn't want to live afraid anymore, but I didn't know if I had the strength to face another storm. Then Gabriel took my hand and held it gently, firmly. "You're not alone this time." And in that single moment, I knew that even if the darkness returned, it would not swallow me whole the way it once had. I was no longer standing in it by myself. That night, the rain fell hard, streaking across the window in long, broken lines like smeared brush strokes. I had bolted the door, turned off the hallway light, checked the cameras twice, habits that had grown out of the night the wooden doll arrived. Gabriel stayed, sitting in the chair near the window, his eyes fixed on the phone screen showing the live feed from the camera outside. I was washing dishes when Mia's scream tore through the apartment. It wasn't the whiny cry of a child, it was sharp, primal terror, the kind of scream I thought I had forgotten since the night Travis yanked my hair in front of her. I dropped the plate in my hand and ran, but Gabriel reached the door a heartbeat before I did. He flung it open, and in the dim glow of her star-shaped nightlight, I saw Mia curled into the corner of her bed, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes wide and unblinking, her whole body shaking. Gabriel didn't ask questions, didn't panic. He approached her slowly, as if afraid a sudden movement would shatter her completely, then sat beside the bed, his voice soft in a way I had never heard from him. "It's me, sweetheart. You're safe. Nothing is here. No one is here." He lifted both hands slowly, openly not touching her yet, only showing her that he carried nothing that could hurt. Mia sobbed, her voice broken and incoherent. It, it's in the closet. Mommy, I saw its eyes." Gabriel turned his head, signaling to me with just a look. I opened the closet, finding only old coats and a box of toys. I knelt, checked every corner. "There's nothing here, baby. Just your toys." But she didn't hear me. She was trapped inside her fear, as though some shadow of Travis had slipped out through a crack in her dreams. Gabriel glanced around the room, then stood suddenly and stepped out. I followed him, but he returned almost instantly, holding the oversized gray hoodie Mia had borrowed from him once when she pretended to be a superhero. He knelt again, his voice barely louder than the rain tapping against the window. "Remember your superhero cape? If you wear it, every monster has to run away. You remember that, right?" Mia lifted her tearful eyes, recognizing something familiar, something safe. Gabriel draped the hoodie over her shoulders, zipped it up gently, then placed his hand on her head. "There, armor on. Nothing can hurt you now." She inhaled shakily, then leaned forward, burying her face in his chest as if it were the only safe place left in the world. Gabriel didn't say another word. He simply held her one arm around her small back, the other gripping the hoodie's collar, as if he could shield her body with his own. I stood in the doorway, throat tight, watching them as the truth settled quietly over me. He was no longer the stranger who came by to help, no longer just the man with the mysterious past. He had become something in my daughter's heart, a steady point she had never known since the day she was born. When Mia fell asleep against him, her breathing soft and even like a door finally closing after a storm, Gabriel stayed perfectly still, not shifting even once. I fetched a light blanket and draped it over them, then sat beside them in silence. Outside, the rain tapped gently on the roof. Inside, I felt something warm threading through every cold place in me. I didn't know what Travis was still capable of, But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Mia did not have to face her monsters alone anymore. She had Gabriel, and so did I. Gabriel stayed until Mia was fully asleep, her head resting on his shoulder, her breath rising and falling like a small tide. I rose first, fetched a pillow, and lifted her from his arms, laying her gently onto the bed. He didn't take his eyes off her until I guided him out of the room and closed the door softly behind us. The apartment was quiet, filled only with the soft patter of rain and the warm glow of the small lamp near the couch. I didn't know what to say. Something inside me trembled. Not fear, but a pull, a shifting, as if parts of me long fractured were moving back into place simply because he was in the room. Gabriel sat down, shrugging off his damp coat. His eyes lingered on my hands, still trembling from Mia's terror. I poured 2 cups of tea, my fingers clumsy, spilling a few drops on the table. He didn't comment. He only watched, not with judgment but with a patience so unfamiliar it almost hurt to be seen by it. Finally, I spoke, my voice raw like someone who had walked a long road without stopping. "Do you know what you did tonight?" Gabriel tilted his head slightly, unsure which moment I meant. I let out a small, shaky laugh at myself, at the emotion swelling in my chest. "You didn't just soothe a child. You held the part of me I've never dared to face. You sat inside a fracture no one has ever touched." He said nothing at first. He looked at me for a long time, as if searching for words that wouldn't shatter the heaviness between us. Then he stood, stepping toward me. His hand brushed mine lightly, then slowly, deliberately he took it in his. Not urgent, not claiming, just acknowledging. "Elena," he murmured, my name sounding strange and hauntingly familiar in his voice. I looked up at him, and in that moment I knew what was coming. Not because I had been waiting for it, but because every piece of me had finally stopped resisting it. Gabriel leaned in, so slowly it left room for me to step back if I chose, but I didn't. I closed my eyes as his hand tightened gently around mine, letting the last bit of distance dissolve. The first kiss wasn't fierce or desperate. It was soft, so impossibly soft it made something deep inside me ache. It wasn't like any kiss I had known, not a refuge, not a plea, not a domination. It was a declaration, a quiet, "I'm here," without a single word spoken. When he pulled away, I didn't open my eyes right away. I rested my forehead against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm that felt like it was ushering me back into myself. His arms tightened around me, warm and solid, as if nothing could break through them. I had never imagined being loved this way without performance, without fear, without asking permission to exist. The tiny room seemed to exhale with us, embracing the fragile beginning of something new. I lifted my head, looked into his eyes, and for the first time dared to ask in a whisper heavy with hope, "Are you afraid?" Gabriel smiled, a quiet, gentle curve that reminded me of the first night I saw him in the diner. "Yes, but I'm more afraid of losing you." And I knew, even with all the unknowns waiting ahead, that I no longer walked alone. My heart had finally been touched, really touched by someone willing to hold it with patience, with his own scars, and with all the things that didn't need promises to be real. Since the night Gabriel and I shared our first kiss, something in the apartment shifted. Not loudly, not in any showy way, but in the small gestures, the quiet glances, the silences that once terrified me, and now felt like the safest places I could rest. Gabriel didn't move in with us, not entirely, but he was there every day, from morning until evening, in a way that felt so natural it was as if he had never been outside our lives to begin with. He was the one who drove Mia to school each morning, the one who remembered her favorite lunchbox, the one who waited at the school gate when my shift ran late. With me, he never pried, never controlled, never pushed his way into the cracks I wasn't ready to open. He simply appeared at the exact moments I needed someone, sometimes as nothing more than a warm hand around mine when I felt unsteady, or a gentle knock at the door just when I caught myself thinking, I wish he were here. He fixed the bathroom door that had slipped off its hinges, added safety locks to the windows, even installed a small camera facing the parking lot where I'd once found Travis's note. But what truly told me he had become part of our lives was the way Mia stopped calling him Uncle and began calling him by his name. Gabriel, I drew this for you. Gabriel, I saw a green dinosaur on the playground today. I think it misses me. He never corrected her, never told her to use any other title. He only smiled each time she said his name, as if no one had ever spoken it quite right until she did. On the nights we ate dinner together, Mia would sit between us, telling tangled stories in the breathless way children do when they have not yet learned to pause. Gabriel and I listened, smiling, nodding, sometimes meeting each other's eyes over her head, with the quiet understanding shared by people who had survived more than one kind of hurt. One evening, when Mia spilled her cup of water, she froze, her bottom lip beginning to tremble, bracing herself for shouting or something worse. Before I could speak, Gabriel knelt beside her, picked up the towel, and murmured, "It's all right, little one. Water spills. That's what towels are for. You're dry and safe. That's what matters." Mia looked up at him as if she were learning the meaning of the word adult for the very first time. And I grew used to a man stepping into my kitchen each morning to brew coffee, knowing I liked it weak with 2 cubes of sugar. I grew used to someone checking the window locks before I even had to ask, used to his voice reading to Mia while I folded laundry, used to the smell of soap on the shirts he left draped over the living room chair. More than anything, I grew used to not being strong alone. Gabriel didn't erase the past or mend every wound. He simply stood beside it with me, helped me fold it up, look at it directly, and then set it gently down. One afternoon, when I got off work early and went to pick up Mia, I found her on a bench near the playground sitting quietly beside Gabriel. Neither of them was talking. They were just watching the other children play. He didn't see me right away, but Mia's smile did. I stopped for a moment, letting myself watch. She leaned her head on his shoulder and he ran a hand through her hair, soft as a fingertip brushing a petal. I don't know if there's a clearer definition of a father than that moment, but I knew I was looking at one. I walked toward them. Gabriel lifted his head when I came close, offering a smile that didn't need words. Warmth alone spoke for him. Mia ran to me, wrapping herself around my leg, cheerfully explaining that she had painted with real watercolors today instead of pencils, and Gabriel had brought her apple-flavored snacks. I hugged her tightly, then looked at Gabriel, seeing him watch us with that quiet tenderness, not claiming, not demanding, only receiving. In his eyes, I wasn't the broken woman my past had carved me into. I was someone rebuilding her life, piece by piece, and he was the steady presence waiting patiently beside me in case I needed a hand to brace myself. And I understood then. Family isn't something built from blood. It's the place where you can show up as yourself. The place where the people who stay do so not out of obligation, but out of love. And Gabriel, without question, had become our home. We lived in that peace long enough for me to believe the past had finally retreated. But Travis was not a man who disappeared forever. He returned not with a threatening phone call, not with shadowy intimidation, but with something far colder, something legal. One afternoon, while I was picking Mia up from school, the office administrator asked me to step inside. She handed me a yellow envelope stamped with legal markings. My hands shook as I opened it. The black letters seemed to slide across the page as I read. Travis had filed a lawsuit for full custody of Mia. He claimed I had prevented him from seeing his daughter. He accused me of poisoning her mind against him. For a moment, I thought my heart simply stopped. That night, I sat frozen on the couch, the lawsuit spread across the table, my fingers numb. Gabriel walked in, saw my face, and didn't ask permission. He picked up the documents and read them slowly, each page turning like a weight, pressing against the years I had tried so hard to bury. When he finished, he placed his hand on my knee and tightened his grip. He's wrong if he thinks this is a one-sided battle. I looked at him, trying to find the steadiness he always carried, but inside me the old panic churned like a rising tide. I can't let him near her again, Gabriel. I can't. Gabriel nodded, eyes still lowered over the paperwork. Then we will fight. This time, with the law. What followed was chaos paperwork, lawyers, testimony, meetings with state-appointed officers. I had to prove Travis was a danger, that he had been violent, that his absence from Mia's life wasn't because I shut him out, but because he never wanted to show up. Gabriel collected evidence calling in favors from people I never asked about. He didn't tell me details. He simply told me to focus on Mia, on the truth, and leave the rest to him. I thought I had been strong. But sitting in the lawyer's office, answering questions that dug deep into wounds I had forgotten how to speak of, I realized how unhealed I still was. I had to recount every blow, every night locked outside the apartment, every bruise I covered with discount makeup. I had to explain Mia's terror, how she cried at the sound of men shouting on television, how she crawled under the table when someone knocked too loudly. Every word felt like peeling scar tissue away with bare hands, but I couldn't stay silent. If I didn't speak, Travis would tear back into her life like a storm, destroying everything we had started to build. Gabriel attended every meeting with me. He sat beside me, silent, solid, a wall of protection I had never known. When my voice faltered, when my throat closed around the memories, he rested his hand on my back just enough to remind me I wasn't alone. Travis fought dirty. He hired his own lawyer, painted himself as a wronged father trying to repent. He demanded visitation rights supervised by the court. The thought of that of Mia in a room with him stole sleep from me for many nights. I watched her breathe as she slept, wondering how any legal system could ever consider granting a man like him even a sliver of access to her. Gabriel saw me awake in the dark. He didn't offer pretty promises, only wrapped his arms around me and let me cry against his chest, as though the fear I carried could finally spill somewhere safe. Then one morning, my lawyer called. Our evidence was strong enough. The old recordings, the threatening messages, the neighbors' statements, and Mia's psychological evaluation, all of it. The court denied Travis's petition and issued a restraining order. I stood in the lawyer's office, unable to tell if I was breathing. Gabriel held my hand as if he too had just walked out of a long war. Then he leaned in, whispering, "It's over. He can't touch you or Mia again." I broke this time, not from fear, but from relief so deep my knees nearly gave out. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that even if Travis tried to reappear with new tricks, we were no longer the ones running. We were a family, and we knew how to protect each other. The courtroom that morning was colder than usual, not only because the air conditioning was working at full force, but because the tension in the room hung thick enough to feel like a second layer of frost. I sat in the front row, clutching the hem of my coat, eyes fixed on the floor so I wouldn't have to look at the man I had spent most of my adult life running from. Travis sat only a few feet away, dressed in a dark suit that made him look more like he was stepping into a client meeting than confronting the truth of what he had done. But the only reason I could breathe at all was Gabriel's presence beside me. His shoulder had stayed pressed gently against mine from the moment we walked in until the moment they called my name. My lawyer had told me I would not need to recount every detail of the past, only enough to show why Travis should not have access to Mia. But deep down, I knew I had to do more. I was no longer the woman cowering in a kitchen corner. I was Mia's mother. When they called me, I rose and walked to the witness stand as the clerk announced my name. My heart pounded, but my steps did not falter. I looked at the judge, then at my lawyer, before I began. My voice trembled at first, but within a few sentences it steadied firm, shaped by the years I had held these truths in silence. I spoke about Travis's unpredictable rage. The nights Mia and I slept in the bathroom because it was the only place with a lock he couldn't break. I spoke about fleeing, about the threatening messages, about the blood-stained doll he sent as a warning. I did not cry. I did not allow my tears to blur what needed to be said. I let the truth stand upright, the way I stood. When Travis's lawyer objected, arguing that my words were only one side, Gabriel was called as the second witness. He stood, walked to the stand with the slow, steady stride of a man who understood exactly what was at stake. He wore a white shirt, a pale gray tie, his expression solemn but warm. When asked about his relationship to me, Gabriel didn't hesitate. He stated plainly that he was my partner, that he had helped care for Mia for many months, that he had witnessed every fear we had carried and never once stepped away. When the opposing lawyer scoffed, pointing out that Gabriel had no biological connection to Mia and therefore no right to interfere in someone else's family, Gabriel looked straight at him and spoke with a voice that filled the silent room. Blood is not the only thing that makes a family. I am there every day. I listen to her talk about her nightmares. I hold her hand at the doctor's office. I taught her how to tie her shoes. And if anyone threatens Mia, I will do everything within the law to prevent that harm. In that moment, I saw the judge lift her head. She watched Gabriel for a long second, then turned her gaze to me as if she were weighing something beyond testimony. A presence. A promise. When the court recessed so the judge could review the evidence, I sat again, my hands clasped tightly together. Gabriel placed his hand over mine, warm, steady, silent. When the judge returned, she ruled to deny Travis's petition for custody. She stated clearly that the evidence and testimony made it plain that granting him access would not benefit the child, and that Mia's current stability was something the court intended to protect. I didn't hear the rest. The pounding in my chest drowned everything else out. Travis slammed the table, cursed under his breath. His lawyer had to drag him out of the room. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to anymore. When I turned, Gabriel was already watching me, his deep brown eyes reflecting a pride that said more than any words. I leaned into his shoulder not from exhaustion, but because for the first time I felt completely safe. Not just for myself, for Mia. And in the quiet that settled after the courtroom doors closed, I understood something with absolute clarity. Justice is not only a ruling, justice is being seen, being protected, having someone hold your hand in the coldest place in your life, and knowing you do not stand there alone. The days following the hearing passed as though the entire world had begun breathing slowly again. No more paperwork, no more courtroom summons, no more glimpses of Travis's shadow stretching across my everyday life. The apartment returned to the sound of Mia's laughter, the smell of Sunday morning muffins, the soft golden glow of evening lamps. Gabriel still came over as he always had, but something had shifted not in him, but in me. I realized I was no longer waiting for the storm to return, no longer flinching at the quiet. I lived in it, welcomed it, as if this peace was something I had been meant to have long before I ever believed I deserved it. One cold March evening, after a few unusually warm days, Gabriel and I sat on the balcony wrapped in a thin blanket, cups of hot cocoa in our hands. Mia was asleep, her bedroom door cracked open just enough to let a sliver of moon-shaped lamplight spill into the hall. Gabriel didn't speak for a long time. He simply stared at the sky, sprinkled with faint stars, his shoulder warm against mine. Sometimes, peace doesn't need words, just someone who stays. He squeezed my hand gently. Did you ever think life would look like this? I shook my head with a soft laugh. I once thought I would spend the rest of my life alone with Mia in a tiny apartment, with the door bolted shut every night. And now I have a porch. I have dinner without fear. I have you. He nodded, thoughtful. I didn't imagine this for myself either. I used to live a very different life. But there's one thing I'm certain of. I've never belonged anywhere, as clearly as I do here. He turned toward me then, took both my hands, his eyes warm beneath the glow from inside the apartment. Elena, he said, without a grand proposal, without rings hidden in pastries or fireworks in the sky. It's just me, right now, here with you. I can't promise there won't be storms. I can't promise I'll always be right. But I promise I won't give up. I want to be with you when you're strong and when you feel like you're falling apart. I want to be the person Mia runs to for comfort. And I want to build a home with you not of bricks, but of trust, patience, and love. He leaned his forehead to mine, whispering, "Please, let me stay. Let me be family." I didn't answer immediately. I looked into those eyes where I had seen both hurt and resilience. I thought of every time he stood between me and fear, every gentle touch on my back when my breath shook, every moment he lifted Mia high enough to make her laugh. Every night he listened to the pieces of my past I had never told anyone. Then I smiled, tears forming from joy so sudden it felt fragile. "Gabriel," I said softly, "you never left for me to ask you to stay. But if you need an answer, here it is. I want you here. I want to raise Mia together, burn cookies together, fix what the past shattered together." I held his hands, no ring, no roses, no candlelit ceremony. Only us, two people who once believed we were broken beyond repair, sitting on a small balcony and choosing each other fully. Gabriel pulled me into his arms, holding me as if everything he had carried for years had finally eased. On that small balcony, with only the faint shimmer of city lights below, we leaned into each other knowing that for the first time in many, many years, life had finally softened. Not because it was perfect, but because we had found the courage to stay, to love, and to call each other family. Spring arrived early that year, as if the world itself wanted to take part in the gentle shifts happening inside our small apartment. The trees in the park began to bud, sunlight stretched across the doorstep each morning, and Mia ran through the rooms with an energy I had never seen in her before. Gabriel officially moved in with us on a bright Saturday morning, carrying exactly 3 boxes and an old bookshelf he said was the only piece of his past he wanted to keep. Our life slowly settled into its new rhythm: 3-person breakfasts, quiet evenings reading to Mia, and longer embraces each time one of us stepped out the door. Gabriel didn't try to replace anyone. He simply existed here, quietly, solidly, as if he had always belonged. He taught Mia how to arrange flowers on the weekends, helped me fix the squeaky kitchen cabinet door, and was always the first to wash the dishes after dinner. We didn't talk much about the past. Our present had grown warm enough to soothe the wounds that once made our hearts bleed. And then, one afternoon, while I was mopping the floor and Gabriel was installing a new star-shaped nightlight in Mia's room, she came running out, wrapped her arms around him, and shouted in a voice so pure and innocent it made me freeze where I stood. "Dad, I found my dinosaur. It was under my pillow. Maybe it got cold last night." Gabriel froze for a single heartbeat. Then he bent down, pulled Mia into his arms and held her close, saying nothing, as if he feared speaking might break the moment. I stood there, mop in hand, tears slipping down my cheeks before I even realized. No one had told Mia to call him that. No one hinted. No one planned it. No one rehearsed the moment. It arrived naturally, like a sign that everything we had been building had finally rooted itself in her small, tender heart. And I knew, from that moment on, Mia would never feel like she was missing someone. She had found the person her little heart could call by the most sacred word of all. Family does not always begin with a wedding, or a shared bloodline, or a photograph hung on the wall. Family is someone who sits beside you on your worst night. Someone who helps pick up the pieces they didn't break. Someone who chooses to stay even when leaving would be easier. The story of me, of Gabriel, and of Mia is a long journey from hurt to healing, from fear to courage, from loneliness to belonging. You may not carry scars like mine, but I believe each of us has passed through a stretch of darkness where one outstretched hand would have been enough to change everything. If you see yourself somewhere in this story, if you have been hurt, if you ever believed hope had run out, I hope you understand that you deserve a place to call home, a pair of arms that feel like safety. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this emotional story. How did this story make you feel? Did it touch something deep inside you? Have you ever had a moment when you realized someone was truly your family? Please share your thoughts in the comments. We would be honored to hear the stories your heart carries. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with loved ones if you believe it might touch them too. Each day, we will continue bringing meaningful, heartfelt stories to remind you that even in your darkest days, there is always a little light somewhere, wishing you good health, a peaceful life, and the simple joy found in ordinary moments. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.